Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those that have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events. Free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Calling us from California, we have Chris Thorp on the phone. Chris is a retired law enforcement officer. We'll talk about that later on. And also, he's kind of a big deal when it comes to a group called Enduring Warrior. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And before we get into conversations, I know we got a lot of things to talk about. You're actively involved with a group called Enduring Warrior. What is that and what do you do?
Operation Enduring Warrior has historically been a veterans organization that started when a group of gentlemen got together and walked around Walter Reed Hospital and basically went out and talked to the guys that were injured and didn't give them a chance to basically just marinate in their own frustration and feelings about what their injuries, and they took them out and kind of re-engaged them in life. So Operation Enduring Warrior has its historical tendrils in that, and it's been predominantly with the military. I've done a couple things myself, very grassroots, trying to affect changes in areas that I saw, and I connected with a couple people from Operation Enduring Warrior and made it known that I respected what they did enough that I felt it should be transferred over to law enforcement. And it was my intention to essentially copy their program. So after some conversations, they initially had said, yeah, go ahead. They gave me their blessing. And, we were going to move on. And I was going to create this program myself and hopefully walk alongside them, as a brotherhood. A couple months later, after we had kind of stopped talking, I was working at the time, so I couldn't get strictly into it. They called me up and said that they had wanted to expand their program to include law enforcement, so it would now be a dual military law enforcement organization, and they would bring me on as one of the founding members for the law enforcement division. So at this point in time, I am the program manager for Task Force Sentinel, which is the law enforcement division of Operation Enduring Warrior.
My hat's off to you for doing that. There's a big affinity, a kinship with our law enforcement community and our military community. And this goes way back. This is drilled in my head when I was a rookie police. And I came from a career Navy family. And so many of our police are veterans. And when you have veterans that are at risk or living an at-risk lifestyle, the drug or alcohol problems, quite often the people they deal with the most are police. And no one's got a softer spot in their heart for them than we do.
Right. No, I agree. And that was, to me, it's the same, one mission, one family. Ultimately, we're all attempting the same mission, and a lot of what it is just an area of operations and whatever our mission-specific tasks are with regard to our training. When I was teaching in the academy, anytime that there was a line of duty death for law enforcement, I'd have everybody stand and we take our time to do 60 seconds of silence, and I also made them do that for the military. So anytime when I was teaching, I had a military death that I knew about, I had the recruits come up and they maintained the same semblance of silence and solemnness and remembrance for the military as I had them doing for the law enforcement, because I felt that it was a brotherhood that we needed to respect. So I agree 100%.
And I agree with you also. It is one, and quite often, Chris, people get into this comparison thing, and I don't do it. They'll say, well, the military does this and you guys do that, and somehow, look, there's risks for both professions, and the risks are quite often physical. Many are physically disabled, far more than those who are killed. and many are killed in the line of duty, both in law enforcement and military. And there's so many that are damaged mentally and for lack of better words, emotionally as a result of what they've been through on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had that conversation a lot of times with the military guys. A lot of their more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just the predominant injuries that we see are physical because they're in a more combative environment with regard to that with larger groups. So they're more traumatic. However, the law enforcement seems to exhibit a greater, if not equal, mental, emotional capacity for injury. So we're definitely on par with that. And I think we're learning a lot in law enforcement by looking at the military model of how they handled their injuries, both traumatic and psychological, and moving it over to a law enforcement capacity. So, I think we're on par, and I think we definitely have a very clear-cut understanding of how the jobs impact both sets.
And by the way, my hat's off to California in one respect. They seem to be so much more ahead of the game when it comes to helping brother and sister law enforcement officers who have debilitating post-traumatic stress issues than a lot of our departments on the East Coast. Okay,
and just out of curiosity, how do you see that? Because you're on the East Coast, so I'm on the West Coast. What are the differences that you see?
Two things in particular, and I hate generalizations, Chris, but two things I've seen in particular. I've had so many people on the show that are on the East Coast or middle part of the United States departments, and we're talking 15, 18, 19, 20-year veterans that develop post-traumatic stress disorder and have been fired and have lost their job. And I've met so many more on the West Coast that are retired. Now, some of the ones on the East Coast are getting better about it. And they're all getting better when it comes to critical incident stress debriefing, peer support, all those things. But one of the things I think we lose on Chris, it may be comment on this, is we do a much better job nowadays with the major critical incidents. It's the everyday grind that's wearing people out that we don't address.
Oh, man, that is right on the nail. I found in my issues, it wasn't the incident that was the problem. It was everything surrounding it and the day-to-day stuff of having to try to process that incident while dealing with the day-to-day stuff. It was the grinding of the gears on a constant basis and not the one specific issue. Yeah, no, I think that's nailed on. And it sounds to me, based on what you're saying, is the East Coast has a history of moving towards a termination factor, while we have a history on the West Coast of more moving them towards retirement. Because I know a lot of people who were retired out of PTSD, quite a few on the West Coast.
Yeah, and that's unheard of in many parts of the United States. Before we go to a break, where can people get more information about Task Force Sentinel and Enduring Warrior?
Operation Enduring Warrior is enduringwarrior.org. And if you go to the website, you will see that it is still highly military-centric, and that's because we are still brand new. So as the program grows, the websites and the information will flesh out to a more law enforcement-centric or, on par website. But if you go and look now, it's definitely going to look highly military. Every program that's available on there to the military is available to law enforcement officers. And what we do is we take the time to honor, empower, and motivate our wounded law enforcement officers and our wounded military veterans. And by wounded, I don't strictly mean physical wounds. I mean anything from PTSD to we have gentlemen that are quadriplegics that we will take out skydiving, scuba diving.
Don't go anywhere. We'll return our conversation with Chris Thorp in just a few moments. One of the questions I get all the time is, how can I show my support for law enforcement? We're all busy. We've got busy lives, but there's something oh so simple you can do with our Facebook page. Search for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And when you see a post you agree with that resonates with you, share it, especially episodes of the podcast. To do all that, just search for us on Facebook, look for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to click like. Return our conversation with Chris Thorp. You retired, was it Sonoma County, California?
Yes, sir.
And how long were you in law enforcement?
20 years doing that stuff. And then prior to that, I did about 10 years as a firefighter, medic, and some low-level nursing. So I kind of ran the gamut.
I'd say so. You say ran the gamut. You did a firefighter, is firefighter / EMT?
Yeah, and I ended up going to medic school, so I did that stuff too.
Wow. Those guys, man, they see it all day, every day. It never ends for them.
No, I had a conversation yesterday about somebody that is kind of new to the gig and wanted to know how to turn the adrenaline off at night. And I kind of made the comment that, in the thick of it, I would go out and do CPR to 2 to 3 times a night on some really, really just screwed up stuff. And I would be asleep in the passenger chair on the ambulance before we even cleared the hospital bay.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got out of everything that I realized just how abnormal that is. I mean, in the thick of it, that's what it is. It just is. It's not crazy, strange, weird. We all have our sayings in the way we talk, but it wasn't until I got out of the cyclone that I realized just how kind of destructive it was.
Well, I can tell you one of the things you don't want to do, trust me, don't ask how I know, but to get to sleep at night, you don't want to resort to alcohol. That may work for a while, but in the long run, it's going to bite you in the rear. It's not a good way to deal with it.
Fortunately, I don't drink because I think if I did, I would probably either at this point be dead in prison or at least suffering greatly physically.
And I don't understand the correlation between trauma, stress, all that stuff, what the terms that the clinicians use. I don't understand the correlation between that and alcohol. I do know, and I gave up drinking more than 25 years ago. Some people call it straight edge, Chris. I'm just a guy who doesn't drink or do drugs or anything else. And I used to have a lot of vices. I used to be a wild man. I jokingly would say I'd work 4 to 12 shift, go out to bars, chase women, be up till 4 o'clock in the morning, get a couple hours sleep, go to court in the morning, and then do it all over again. Yeah. Now at 9:30 at night, dude, I'm ready for bed. I'm like such a boring guy, and I'm okay with it.
Hey, I go to bed about 8 o'clock, and one of the reasons is because we take care of my wife's parents, and they go to bed a little early, so we kind of shut down about 8. But I was out at that point in time doing the same thing. Oh my God, 4 o'clock in the morning every day.
I was such a lunatic. And now I tell people my day job, I'm a music DJ in the Florida Keys and Key West. And I tell people I'm the squarest, palest guy you'll meet in Key West. And I'm totally okay with that.
When you say DJ, are you doing music?
Oh yeah, at FM radio station.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
No, that's what I did. I did club DJing back when I first started running calls. So I would go out, run calls, and I go be a club DJ till 4 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah.
That definitely defies the Hollywood stereotypes. A lot of what the show is dedicated to is providing a platform for primarily law enforcement officers, their family members, spouses, other first responders, survivors, and victims of crimes to tell their story. And part of the reason why, Chris, is because Hollywood, when I say Hollywood, movies, television, news, social media, they do such a horrible job of telling our stories. And we've relied on them for far too long. Now we're taking control. Yeah,
no, I agree 100%. I didn't feel like a very glamorous lifestyle. It wasn't one I would have chosen. It wasn't one I wouldn't have recommended, but it was one I did. I'm glad you're doing it now. I'm glad you're having fun playing DJ. I haven't done that for 30 years.
I like it. It's a lot safer than being a police.
Without a doubt.
It's a lot less stressful too. And real quickly, people say to me, "I'm sorry, I don't want to stress you out with all this radio stuff." I go, "Look, this is nothing compared to where I came from."
That's interesting because I noticed when I retired out, I'm struggling dealing with people that come to me with their stories, and I almost find them boring. Oh. They're excited about their day-to-day lives, and I'm trying to engage, and I almost want to look at them and say, "You ever done CPR on a baby? You ever dealt with a child molester investigation from that? Have you ever pulled a teenager out from a suicide victim? no, you're not that interesting.
Right.
I don't want to say that to them, but I know in the back of my head, it's like your excitement level for your day-to-day life, we're not on par. So it makes it very difficult to have. Yeah, I'm struggling with that now.
My social skills are not that good, and my wife is acutely aware of it. And she's the perfect caller. She's like, "Hey, don't answer that question. Just leave it alone." And right now, while we're doing the show, the COVID-19 things going on, and the pandemic and the stay-at-home order, I tell people, they ask how you do it. I'm like, this is right up my alley. I go to work, I come home, and I don't have to be around people. This is wonderful.
Oh my gosh! No, you're right. People have asked me how you're doing. I'm like, my day-to-day life hasn't changed. I could do this forever.
Yeah. But it's funny, and we'll get serious in a moment. I need, as much as I don't like being social, I need to have social contact with people. And the ones who get me the most are police and law enforcement. But there's a lot of other people, too. And it's not that they don't care, but a lot of people did care and do care, and they want to know more. And what we want to do is tell them some of the stories. When you encounter people and they find out you're retired law enforcement, what's the one question that you get most often that annoys you the most?
Oh, that annoys me? That's a good question. I retired at 49 because I had the opportunity to start the stuff with Operation Enduring Warrior, and my date had just came up, and I found that if I went out at 49 versus 50, it wasn't that big of a hit economically. So I bounced out about 6 months early, and I'm the youngest one I see walking through the stores on any given Wednesday. So anytime anybody finds out I'm retired, it's usually, what? How did you do that? And there's this almost look of disdain that I'm early 50s now, and that I'm no longer working and I'm economically okay. And it's like, I put in the time. I did the duty. I worked overtime. I squeezed in with overtime 30 years of service into 20 with mandatory overtime. Plus, you take my 10 years of service with fire and EMS. At age 49, I have crammed in, I would say, 41 years of actual service time. I think I earned it.
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely the case. I can relate. I've had people, they go, "You were retired at 33?" And I tell them yes. And they go, how did you get so lucky? And I'm like, just try getting shot at, have multiple surgeries, and have a total fusion of your right hand and wrist, and you too can be retired at a very young age. We're talking with Chris Thorp. Chris is a retired law enforcement officer, amongst many other things, and also we're talking about Task Force Sentinel and Enduring Warrior. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Back to our conversation with Chris Thorp, retired law enforcement officer from Sonoma County, California. By the way, Chris, thanks for your service. Not only in law enforcement, you're a firefighter, EMT, and you did all that stuff. That's a lot for any one person to do. One of the things that happens to me, and I don't talk about my police career much anymore, only with certain people. And even with certain people, like other police, there's a lot of things I don't talk about because, well, quite honestly, I don't know them very well. But what wound up happening for me years ago, Chris, and I don't know if that happened to you, but going to barbecues and cookouts, and people say, "Oh yeah, here's Jay, he's a police," and they make a joke, and then some jackhammer would come up and holding a beer and say, "Did you ever shoot anybody?" And at first I was nice about it. I was polite. Then I started saying things like, why would I want to talk about one of the worst moments of my life with a total stranger, a jerk at a barbecue? And they'd be like, you don't have to be like that. Well, those questions still linger. When they find out I'm retired police, it's inevitable. It's like, boom, there's the question.
Yeah, everybody gets, what's the worst thing you've seen? what's the worst, what's the worst? And I don't know, how do you explain that? How do you explain that to the average person? I think probably like you did, I skirted the issue. I moved around the issue somehow, pushed it back on them. I think for me, there were a couple incidents that really stood out that tend to be conversation pieces. And one of them was in 2006, I think, plus or minus. I was driving to work, and I was coming on a freeway, and I looked down the freeway when there was a fully involved car fire in the middle of the freeway. And having worked in fire, I was like, okay, this has been going on for a while. What's going on here? And I pull over slowly, get out of the car. I walk over, and there's a child hanging out the back. Fully involved car. His head and his arm are pushed out the back. And I look in the front seat, and there's a woman fully engulfed. She's not moving. And I kind of look at the scene a little confused because I thought this was going on. And then people start running up, and I realized this had just occurred, that I was literally the first one on scene. I'm in my personal vehicle. I'm literally the first one on scene. So I take off my cover jacket and go to start grabbing for the kid, realizing I'm now showing my patches. And it's like, oh, guess what? I'm in charge. Here we go. Rally the troops, get the people going. And eventually we pull the child out. He's about 3 years old, third-degree burns over 90% of his body. One of my partners kind of drives up, shows up finally, gets out of the car. He's looking at me. I'm kind of looking at him. And then we look in the front seat, and the woman in the front seat starts to slowly move. Because, I had written her off as dead. Well, we tried several times to get her in, get her out. We couldn't. Fire shows up. We back out. They remove her. She's still alive at this point, at which point somebody looks in the car, leans out, and goes, there's more in here. So this was a very small that was fully engulfed with flames, probably I would say 12 to 13 feet high. And it was so hot and so intense that neither of us saw the other four people that were in the car. So ultimately what happens is I end up winning or being given the gold medal of valor. And for me, it was very frustrating in that this was something I didn't plan for. This wasn't something I was moving along for. This was just something that I happened across, and I acted because it's who I am. And one of the problems I had was that during the incident, I became really frustrated with the people around me that were screaming. And I remember thinking in my head, shut the bleep up, you're not helping. And I then went home and went to sleep right after this whole thing. And I'm given a gold medal of valor for this. And I felt internally how screwed up my eye that I can witness 4 or 5 people burning to death 6 inches from my face and go home and go to bed. So internally, I had a really hard time with that, and I went through some problems with that. But what really brought it around is I met the kid on a happenstance outing, oh my God, 12 years later, the child that I pulled from the car, and I happened to have my gold medal in my Jeep in the glove compartment because that's where I kept it because I wasn't really interested in it. And I ended up giving it to him for everything he had endured, all the challenges he's faced, and how much of a warrior he's become because of that incident. So I ended up giving it away. So that's been kind of my story from beginning to end. On one of the main things I had was how I happened across this, the tragedy, the carnage, how frustrated I became, and then ultimately turning it around and giving this young man who survived this horrific thing an award, for lack of a better term.
I think you described that very, very well. I think you're probably, if you're like me, the term frustrated might be an understatement. And I do recall actually having IID complaints against me for not that I wanted to say something to people to shut up, you're not helping. I actually said it, and worse. And those are the kind of things that people oftentimes don't expect you to be human. They expect you to be a robot. And there's so many emotions that go through your head. At the time when this is going on, Chris, if someone had asked you why you did something, you probably couldn't even tell them.
No, and that's why I didn't feel like I deserved an award. That's who I am. That's what I do. This was an incident that happened that I simply reacted. There was no planning. There was no forethought. There was no, I'm going to go do this today.
I get why you say that, and I understand 100%. But a lot of people don't realize what it takes. And I have to correct them all the time. I never really got afraid until afterwards. And in some cases, I was throwing up afterwards. In other ones, I was laughing. Other times, I'm screaming like a lunatic. And then other times, I go right to bed. It was no rhyme or reason to it. But you go from extreme boredom to a life or death situation in a matter of seconds. In this case, look, you're just driving along, minding your own business, and boom, it's right there. So you reacted. It doesn't seem like a hero or heroic thing when you describe it that way. But to everybody else, knowing they won't run to danger, it is heroic.
Okay. So to me, it is more heroic for the person that wakes up this morning, that drives to the blood bank, that puts their arm out, that donates a pint of blood that will save 3 lives because there was a concerted thought process that took decisive action.
I get it. Yeah, I get it.
I know you do. And so for me, the word hero is really hard to embrace because I heard that a lot because I didn't do anything except for being me.
And that's part of the problem I have. People are very quick to criticize police. They're very quick to say, well, they should have done this, they shouldn't have done that. And they're very slow to say, well, they did heroic stuff. And we are, by nature, as an organization, as a family, as a blue family, whatever term people want to use, we are not quick to say, yeah, that was some heroic stuff. We'll say it about other guys we worked with, but we will never say it about ourselves.
Why is that?
I don't know. Maybe it's a level of uncomfortability. I'll be honest with you, Chris. People will say things to me like, it's taken me a long time. And this is a very simple thing, but it's taken me a long time to get comfortable with this. People will say, thank you for your service. It's very much appreciated. And I wouldn't know what to say. I would downplay it. Now I say, you're welcome and thank you for saying so.
Perfect. Exactly.
Yeah. But before, it was, well, you know, I just doing my job. It was the worst. Taking compliments and taking criticism, I'd much rather be criticized. It's much easier to handle than taking compliments. We are talking with Chris Thorp. Chris is retired law enforcement officer. He'll explain more. He was a firefighter, did EMT thing. He's heavily involved in a group called Operation Enduring Warrior and Task Force Sentinel. We'll be right back.
Whether you're an aspiring podcaster, new or published author, speaker, content creator, visionary, or a dreamer crafting your message, now is your moment to shine. At CreativeCon 2024, you'll discover how to position yourself as an industry leader and leverage podcasting, publishing, production, and promotions to maximize your impact. For those seeking purpose, we'll ignite your storytelling passions and guide you to a more fulfilling path. To secure your tickets for this one-of-a-kind live event taking place at Chicago's Metropolis Performing Arts Center on February 17th and 18th, visit creativecon.com. That's CRE8TIVECON.com. Get your tickets today. The future is yours. Speak it, write it, live it.
Return our conversation with Chris Thorp. Chris, a retired Sonoma County law enforcement officer, also heavily involved in a group we'll talk more about, Operation Enduring Warrior. Chris, before we went to break, we're talking about this thing of being uncomfortable with labels of heroic or warrior or thank you for your service. I struggled with that for a very, very long time. Did you find it difficult as well?
Oh, very much so. I found it extremely difficult to bring in and accept that gratitude, that face-to-face gratitude. What I also found really difficult to assimilate was the law enforcement culture with regard to civilians, in that nursing, EMS, and fire, you go to the same calls and everybody is there to welcome you, to say thank you. Here you go, EMS, get cake and pie sometimes. Fire department, definitely cake and pie. Nursing, they would bring us chocolates to the nursing station. Law enforcement, not so much.
Right.
Not so much. So for me, for my 20-year career, I had trouble being flipped off for walking into a room to help somebody, whereas if I was wearing the turnouts from the fire department or the stethoscope from EMS, they welcomed me. It's like, wait, you're prejudging me based upon the color of my uniform, not the content of my character, not what my intention is.
Yeah. And you're judging me as a person based on stereotypes that you've been told by other people that you don't know.
No, you're right. And I can't say it is the same thing, but it gave me a sense of what people that feel racism is about.
I see your point.
Same. Yeah, I mean,
I always say this example, when something happened in L.A., let's say the Rodney King beatings, then we would get blamed for it in Baltimore, as if we were one big organization and we all did the same thing. And one of the thoughts that occurred to me all the time, I was in 4 shootings in 10 years, and the first 2, I never fired a shot back. Fortunately, everybody survived. But one of the first things that went through my head when I could think about it was that these people want to kill me. And they have no idea who I am as a person.
Correct. Exactly.
They didn't care what color my skin was. They didn't care anything about me. They just wanted to avoid apprehension. Yet if a police did something, it's about race. It's about other things.
Yeah, it is. And it's an asymmetrical situation.
Right.
It just is. It's just an asymmetrical situation. We have to play by certain rules, and the other side doesn't. And as the moment we even bend the rules, even if it's a mistake, we're called out on it, and sometimes in a way that just doesn't make sense and isn't even applied to the situation. It's just a way of calling us out.
Right.
And it's difficult. And so for me, with that frustration, I had made, a few thousand, I think, of these black morale patches that said thank you in white letters, and then it had a thin blue line down the middle. And for me to try to find a way to get past that feeling uncomfortable of being, said thank you to, and another way to try and embrace and kind of create a bridge between the community and officers, I traveled across the United States from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I actively sought out law enforcement officers, and I handed these patches out to them with a little note saying who I was and what I was doing. And I tried simply to walk up, say thank you, look them in the eye, shake their hand, and give them a patch. And the patch, it's a modicum of a thread. It doesn't amount to much, but the symbolism is that I had to pay for that. So that money came out of my life that I traded for the money. So it's a small portion, but that represents a small moment of my life that I'm giving to them, and they can take it. And if they're having a bad day, they can see it and know that somebody actively said thank you. Now, yes, I'm their peer, but I'm also a civilian.
Right.
Which means anytime I'm anywhere and I have to call 911, they're going to come to me. So I'm saying thank you as a civilian. Now, I have the short hair. I had a shirt with a symbol line on it. I even actively addressed myself as a law enforcement officer from California, and this is what I'm doing. And they still either looked at me, took the patch, shoved it in their pocket, and ran off, or they flipped the patch around in their fingers for a good 30 seconds before the cogs connected. They realized what was going on, and then sometimes they broke down. They would cry.
Yeah.
Saying nobody said thank you. Hey, man, that's awesome. This is great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I dropped off a patch, a big stack of patches in Winnemucca, Nevada, asked to talk to the chief. They're like, well, he can't come out. He's busy. And I said, okay, here's, this is what these are for. This is what's going on. I got back in my car, and by the time I'm getting out to the car, the chief is running out to come talk to me. It was, at first it's like, no. But as soon as they realize what's actively happening, they're much more engaged, because all of a sudden they realize somebody is actually trying to say thank you.
And it's such the hardest thing to do. I've gotten much better taking that, and I try to make a point to say thank you to every law enforcement officer and firefighter, EMT, and nurses, and the healthcare professionals that I can. And it's always awkward, but I make a point of doing it because it was never done back on the job. When I was working, it never happened. It happens far more now that I'm retired and been retired a long time than it ever did when I was on the job.
Yeah, and I actually have additional patches made for, so I have law enforcement, fire, EMS, nurses, and military, just for that reason. So I spend my days a lot of times going out with patches in my car, and when I come across these people, I take the time to go out, shake their hand, look them in the eyes, say thank you. Because I think the way to really bridge the gap is the face-to-face thank you, the interaction on a personal level, not just wearing a T-shirt, throwing a sticker on your car or something like that. That I get that that's a way of showing support, but it means so much to have somebody look you in the eye, extend their hand, and extend that gratitude. That's a personal moment that I think we sorely lack.
Well, I want to thank you, A, for your service, but also thank you for taking the time and energy to do that, because that takes a lot of planning and conscious thinking. I'm going to make the effort. I'm going to go through the uncomfortable bits to do this, because it's going to be, and quite honestly, it's uncomfortable for the cop on the other end, and it's uncomfortable for me doing it, but it's got to be done. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yes, but it's only uncomfortable until you do it, and then as you continue to do it, and then somebody sees you doing it, they go, hey, I like that, I want to do that too. As soon as you get another person doing it, it takes away the uncomfortableness, and all of a sudden we're expressing gratitude towards each other in ways we hadn't previously.
Well, I'm going to shift gears back a little bit. One of the things I've gotten to do working in radio is I've gotten to do a lot of events, especially ones in the D.C. area, for wounded veterans at Walter Reed. And one of the hardest things I found to do was to go up and start a conversation, because I was always afraid of saying the wrong thing. And it's not just with our wounded veterans. I still the same problem with surviving spouses of law enforcement officers killed in line of duty. I have the same problem with surviving spouses of those who died by suicide. Afraid of saying the wrong thing, so I don't engage or reach out. I've gotten a lot better at that. Is that something that you've been doing with Enduring Warrior, Operation Enduring Warrior?
Yeah, no, that's what we do is we reach out. We reach out to people and we bring them in and we let them know they're not alone, that we are here, that this is a family organization. You do not have to be military. You do not have to be law enforcement to be a part of it, that we bring everybody in because we want everybody to support one another. Yeah, and I think, I don't know if you found this to be the case, but the worst thing you can say is nothing.
Right.
If you say something, you may trigger a memory, an emotion, something in that person that causes them to react, but it's not like that was the wrong thing. It just happened to be the thing that brought it forth. But I think, and not being in that situation, it's my belief that they would understand what your intention was, not to bring it up, but to express condolences, support, those kind of things. So I think not saying anything is the wrong move. And I understand about being tactful and everything, but I would rather err and show support than apathy. And
very quickly, for running time, where can people get more information about what you do?
What we do at Operation Enduring Warrior is we take our wounded guys and we basically surround them, support them, and we help them go out and live their best version of their lives. We do that through a lot of different things, specifically adventure therapy. We'll go out and do obstacle course races, scuba diving, skydiving, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the choice is theirs. It is 100% free of charge to them. We are 100% volunteer, which means that nobody makes a single dime on this. We all do this because it's the right thing to do, and we are 100% donation driven.
And get more details online. What's the website address?
www.enduringwarrior.org.
Chris, thanks so much for your service, and thanks for being a guest on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Get access to free podcast versions of the show and more on Facebook. Do a search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.